When my son said he low-key forgot, it completely changed the way I think about accountability. And before I tell you why, let me tell you where my head was that day. I was driving home from work, and honestly, I already had a knot in my stomach. I really didn't want to argue tonight. The day before, we had talked about a couple of places that were hiring. The plan was simple. While I was at work, he was going to stop by and apply. 2 steps, 2 stops. That was it. So the whole drive home, I'm doing that thing that I think a lot of parents do. I realized there was no notification from the security camera. I'm thinking, did he go? Did anything move forward today? Is he still in pajama pants? But the whole conversation in my head was done before I even pulled into the driveway. After I got home, I overheard him talking to his mom, and he said he low-key forgot. Low-key. Like it was a small thing, like he'd forgotten to take the trash out. Not forgotten that this is one thing standing between him and a paycheck, or even him and independence. A few minutes later, he walked by and I asked, so how'd it go applying at those jobs today? Because I didn't really want him to know that I overheard the first conversation. He looked at me and said, actually, I kind of forgot to go. Now, if you'd asked me a few years ago how I would have handled that moment, I'd have blown up, no question. What do you mean you forgot? We literally talked about this. How do you forget something that is so important? I know exactly how that conversation would have gone. It wouldn't have gone well because I've had it before more times than I can count. But this time, something made me stop. Instead, I said, okay, let's circle back in a while. Not because I didn't care. Honestly, because I cared too much to trust what would have come out of my mouth right then. I needed to think. A couple hours later, I asked him if he could sit down with me. And I told him something that honestly surprised me when I was saying it. I was kind of proud of myself. I said, this isn't really about showing up to those 2 potential workplaces. It's about one word. You said you forgot. And if you forgot, that tells me this isn't actually one of the priorities for you right now. That was the moment everything changed. Not because I caught him, not because I won the argument, because suddenly we weren't talking about 2 job applications anymore. We were talking about priorities. I told him I can't carry the responsibilities for another adult. I can't want your future more than you do. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to step back. I'm going to observe for a couple of weeks. I'm not going to judge you off of one conversation. I'm going to watch your actions, and then we're going to sit down and have a very honest conversation about what it looks like living here moving forward after we've watched your actions. That's it. Something shifted after that. Not because I delivered some incredible speech, trust me, I hadn't. I was mostly trying not to lose my temper, to be honest. And not because I'd suddenly figured out the secret to parenting an adult, but because for the first time, we weren't arguing over one missed application. We were talking about ownership. And to his credit, he owned it. He admitted he hadn't been engaged. He admitted he needed to lock in. And since then, his actions have started matching his words. Now, does this mean that every morning he wakes up at 6, turns on LinkedIn and has a cup of coffee in his hand? No, absolutely not. But forward movement was never about the conversation. It was about changing the direction of the conversation. That's the lesson I keep relearning. Sometimes we become, so focused on the missed application, the forgotten task, the thing that didn't happen, that we never stop and ask what those words actually are telling us. Because maybe I forgot was never really the problem. Maybe it was the clue that pointed us towards a conversation we actually needed to have. And sometimes forward movement starts with asking better questions. If that conversation sounds familiar, if you've got an adult son or daughter and you're trying to figure out where accountability ends and parenting begins, I'd love to have you here. That's what we're going to talk about. Not pretending, not perfect families, just honest conversations, real accountability, and forward movement, one conversation at a time. And so help me, no more pajama pants.